welcome to week 8. This week we are joined by John Hazelwood, who is an entrepreneur at the International Entrepreneur Accelerator, located in Texas. He is going to be sharing a little bit about himself as well as his own startup that he is making right now. It's AI consulting firm that's going to be guiding companies to incorporate more AI into their companies so that they can become more productive. He will be sharing a whole lot more about that himself. So why don't we welcome John to present a little bit and tell us about his experience in startups.
Great, thank you, Jason. And it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I see everyone has muted their microphones. If you want to turn your videos on, that would be great to be able to see everybody. Feel free. So it's always great when you're working remotely to be able to see who you're talking to. So thank you so much, Hannah. Hi. And so I guess just to start off, I'm going to give a little bit of history about kind of how my journey started and kind of how everything's kind of come to where it's at today. So I'm from Austin, Texas. It's where I'm currently based. My father was from Austin. My mother's Greek. And so I've spent a lot of time overseas and in Greece and in Europe. I've had a number of businesses that I've been caused me to travel quite a bit. So my mother speaks 7 languages. My brother speaks 7 languages. So we're kind of an international family. So I grew up in Austin, and my mother had a couple restaurants, and then she owned a travel agency, and all the kids, we had 3 siblings, and we were all working in the restaurants and in the travel agencies growing up as children. If you saw My Big Fat Greek Wedding, very similar to My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the first one, because they were also in the restaurant business, and then they got into the travel agency business. So even the window that's on the My Big Fat Greek Wedding looks like the window at our travel agency in Austin. It's kind of interesting. But so I ended up working in the travel agency. I went to University of Houston. My major was hotel restaurant management. Came back to Austin and ended up opening up my own travel agency on campus, focused on the student market, selling these consolidator tickets that were, you couldn't get them directly from the airlines. They were, at the time, travel agents would look these up in a database and then go to their systems that travel agents use. If you were to Sabre, for example, and make the reservation in these systems, they're called global distribution systems because they aggregated all the airline connections. And travel agents would use these systems, and over time, these systems got hotels and cars and aggregated all the travel content in them. And back then, these consolidator fares were out of this database that some people were selling with the fares in them in the class of service, B class or C class, and with the fare and the airline, and then you could look it up in these systems, the class of service, and you could book it and then send it to the consolidator that had that special fare. At the same time, I was working on that project. Me and my brother and I, my brother, as I mentioned, speaks 7 languages, and we got into we were sports agents focused on female basketball players. This was in the 90s, early 90s. There wasn't a WNBA at the time. So all these girls, all of our clients had to play overseas. So Italy, Spain, France, Japan were some of our top markets. Each team was allowed 2 foreign players, and of course, normally there would be Americans playing there, and all these national team players, these top players, they couldn't play here at home, so they were all going and playing overseas. So caused me to travel quite a bit, talking to a lot of teams, and been in Japan 13 times. One year I was in Europe, was traveling about 10 months out of the year, in the US and abroad. And anyway, while that was going on, my brother and I grew up as soccer players, and had an opportunity to buy a local semi-pro soccer team here in Austin called the Sockadillos. I like soccer and armadillos, Sockadillos. It was a semi-pro team, and it was called the Sizzle. The league was called the USISL, 64 league team in the US. So we were the Austin franchise. I ran that for a couple years. It was a summer season, so we were recruiting soccer players, and we would play within our region. And that led to the World Cup was in the US in 1994, and that was 92 and 93 that we owned the Austin Sockadillos. So since I was in the soccer business and sports business in general, I spearheaded an effort to bring a World Cup team to Austin. In 1994, Dallas was one of the venues where the World Cup was being held. Bulgaria was one of the teams that was playing in Dallas. So I contacted all the teams that were playing in Dallas, and I ended up recruiting the Bulgarian World Cup team. They came to Austin, and they had their training camp for 10 days before going to Dallas to play in the World Cup. And a lot of you probably don't obviously remember back then if you've heard about the last World Cup in the US, but Bulgaria came in 4th place. They were kind of the underdogs, a very small country. Unexpectedly, they made it to the semifinals, fighting California. And through that, I met a guy that was head of VRML technologies at IBM, physics PhD, minus genius guy. He nights and weekends, developed this consolidator database to work with this system, this global distribution system. And we launched in 1995 the first online booking engine where you could make a travel reservation and an airline reservation. So we ended up getting funded here in Austin. A gentleman by the name of Bob Inman, Admiral Bobby Inman. I used to be director. He was director of he was national security advisor for Ronald Reagan. Was head of the CIA for a while. He was Bill Clinton nominated him for Secretary of Defense. He turned the position down, but Admiral Inman was from Austin. He was an early investor in Dell and Oracle, one of the first investors, and that's how he created his wealth. So he invested, and at the time I was actually talking to a guy from India that was pitching me on outsourcing to one of 3 companies in India to outsource the development of our technology. I thought it was a great idea. You could develop technology at a lot less cost with, smart people that were just as smart as the people in the US, but the economy, caused salaries to be very low. And so once he funded me, I was going down that path. And after meetings with him, he counseled me on not outsourcing the development of our technology as a startup, to keep it in-house. And I was like, well, I was in Bulgaria and the math and science level was very high. Costs are very low. So a month later, I was in Sofia, Bulgaria. The average salary at the time was $150 a month, and that was across the board. People with their physics PhDs in physics and master's degree. The economy was just Bulgaria was one of those countries that came out of communist bloc. So the wall had come down just not too many years before that. And so we were hiring people at 3 times the average wage at $500 a month. We brought our first people to Austin out of the incubator that we were at. And then they went back and there were guys, 3 guys. One of them ended up being our head of technology, a guy with this long beard, Nikolai. And they were working, when they went back, they were working out of the Bulgarian Academy of Science because Nikolai was a physics PhD and was a professor at the Bulgarian Academy of Science. So I went back and they were working out of this very small room with one window and very dark. And it was, as you can imagine, Eastern Europe, 3 chain smokers sitting there smoking cigarettes while they were, on their computers in this small room. That evolved into we did working on our travel system and we got into the Y2K business about a year later. Admiral Inman was on the board of directors of 5 Fortune 100 companies at the same time. And he came back and persuaded me that we should focus on Y2K because the year 2000 bug in 1999, that date rolled over to the year 2000 and the world was going to come crashing down. So we kept about 15 developers working on travel technology, and we got into the Y2K business. The company was called Transit Solutions. And we developed a number of applications converting this old code PL1 and COBOL into some new languages. And we were doing some stuff in embedded systems and the date rollover in embedded systems and embedded devices. We had a number of people from different universities in Bulgaria that was able to recruit. And that we got, then 1999 came around and of course there wasn't the work that was out there at the time. People thought the Y2K was going to be going on until, for another 5 years, and EDS had a plan to buy computers for pennies on the dollar, refurbish them with their tech people, and then sell those computers. And of course, nothing happened. The world was fine after year 2000. So anyway, we got back into travel. We ended up selling the company to IFAO, a German company that has they were focused on a corporate booking engine for the corporate market system, the travel system. I ended up taking the code that we had because they weren't interested in the code. We had about almost 100 people in Sofia, and they wanted to use those developers to develop their own technology. So I went out and with that technology and raised money from WorldSpan, which was based out of Atlanta, a competitor to Sabre, which is based in Dallas. And Admiral Inman participated. And that company was called Travel Storemaker. We grew that company to about 130 people. We went through about 3 different applications. Our 3rd generation basically was a middleware which was developed in about 2012, which took this layer that integrates APIs and could have an API out. And we aggregated a lot of different data. We integrated WorldSpan, Sabre. We had about 20 different airlines that we integrated into the system. And we could ping all of these systems simultaneously, round trips, one ways, and we could get a one way from an airline's website, for example, and then another one way from Sabre on a different airline, and construct fares. Basically, the plan was to develop this multimodal where we could go out and take, let's say, if you're flying from LA to Milan, flight to London, rail to Paris, bus from Paris to Milan and construct fares where you could create an itinerary that didn't exist. And anyway, we ended up pivoting at some point in time to, we launched Sharing Exchange, which was going to be a meta search, kind of like Kayak for the sharing economy. And we were going to, over time, evolve into a multimodal. I ended up having a houseboat in Austin. I ended up renting it out on Airbnb, and we ended up. I was sourcing. I was spent quite a bit of time on trying to find funding, and ended up looking at taking properties and listing them on different platforms like Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, HomeAway at the time, and we ended up pivoting because it was my thinking was it was going to be a lot easier to launch and bootstrap it rather than focusing on the meta search, which was going to require a significant amount of funding. So we ended up pivoting to what we call property management listing service. We had about 500 properties, and they were all basically in Europe. And COVID happened, and no one was cross-bordering. So, you know, our business tanked for 2 years, and so I had this houseboat that I was living on, and I was renting, and we ended up going out to Lake Travis in Austin and shuttling guests back and forth to the houseboat, and we're doing overnight stays and daytime events. And so I decided, well, try and create a model around this opportunity. Nobody was doing it, and so that whole company's called Natura Reserve, and we incorporated glamping into it. So our model is to launch Natura Reserve as a water-based glamping and eco resort, where we'd have glamping on land and vessels on water, and have daytime events and overnight stays. So I spent most of the last year focused on that. We had a meeting with the chancellor of Texas A&M University. He liked the idea, and we've kind of started focusing on a couple of opportunities in Bryant College Station, where Texas A&M is located, and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Have an island, 12,000 students on Ward Island, and so we've been kind of going through that process, and it's very slow because you're dealing with universities but I was I went to College Station, and I had met with the dean of the new hospitality program, and asked him if, you know, what they were doing in AI, and they weren't really doing anything. I had a dinner with the head of agriculture at Texas A&M, and have 1,100 students, and he said, "Well, we're not really doing anything. We talk about it a lot, and I've used ChatGPT a couple of times." And I was like, "Wow, you know, a university that is a real laggard and not, you know, embracing kind of what's going on in the world of technology and AI." And so that kind of led me down this path of thinking, you know, to try and do something in AI. And we proposed to the university to do kind of a podcast course with CEOs of top travel companies, and from a practical standpoint, what they're doing in AI, and you know, that is increasing productivity and moving their business forward. So that kind of has led to, you know, where I decided to launch Flomad, and looking at really how to launch a startup that didn't require funding, and because every startup, right, you're almost forced into doing something that you got to go out and raise money for it, instead of figuring out how you can take something and bootstrap it and get it to profitability. And so I'm trying to kind of not be in that mindset of being forced to do something that it requires funding. And the logical thing to me was consulting. Right now, if you look at, from a practical standpoint, companies today, at least the small to mid-sized companies, they're out there. There's lots of noise coming about AI, and these people don't really have a clue on what's going on, and really what kind of tools that they can use to enhance their business, productivity tools. And if you look at, things from, employees at companies now are using ChatGPT. Some of them might be using ChatGPT for stuff, and there could be uploading sensitive data. Company data is sensitive, and they shouldn't be uploading it into ChatGPT, because there's things, of course, you providing these LLMs data that they can use for learning, and so there's agreements out there that companies should have their employees signing, that they are not uploading data. Just a simple thing is, uploading data to these LLMs, but looking at some of the tools, like, we've got Autopilot on here, and Read.ai. Those came out um, before Zoom came out with their AI tool, that transcribes these meetings and gives you a synopsis of the meeting and what action items. And John has these 3 things that he needs to do, and Jason has these things to do, and we're going to follow up on this date. And it's a personal assistant that, in our weekly meetings, our team meetings that we used to have, it had a team leader that would have to take notes in these meetings, and then send the recap out to the team, and what action items that each person had. And so now you've got these tools that are, they're automatic. You don't need a person for doing that. There's a tool that's out there that's been launched, it's gotten funded. A very similar tool, but it's meant for sales teams. And they have their API integrated to these sales call centers, where when these calls are made, incoming or outgoing calls, they're doing the same thing, taking notes, synopsis of the meeting, action items, the follow-up, and then it's integrated to sales CRMs, and it automatically uploads the data to these sales CRMs. So think about how time-consuming that an app like that is for people, and they're selling it at $100 a seat per month. So there's tools like that, and of course, tools, bots on websites, that right now, a lot of bots that are out there, you respond and you get just some random answer, and we'll get back to you. But now you've got tools, bots that can actually convert, people. Maybe you've heard of Poly.ai. Some guys, some people, students from former students from Cambridge, they were working on speech technologies, and they raised 66 million. They're targeting very large companies that have call centers. And so you're calling these call centers, and they have these bots, these AIs that convert. They're converting 30% of the calls that used to require a human to not need to have a human. And they're so realistic when you're talking to them. And they take you through this process, and then okay, and if it gets to a point where it needs a human, so I'm sure maybe all of you are familiar with a lot of these tools that are out there. I've been trying to immerse myself and listen to, do a lot of research on the tools that are out there and who's getting funded, and there's just a lot of stuff going on out there. There's thousands of AI startups. So our plan right now, I put a team of people together, of people that have been involved in research and AI and consulting, and basically putting kind of a plan together to target companies and look at certain verticals where we kind of find a sweet spot where, from a consulting standpoint, it's consulting. So you provide consulting service and you get paid for those consulting services. So it's not something that you would need funding, but what we want to do is go have services and a solution, and have it evolve into a solution. So in essence, we're kind of like where we want to get to, and with a solution. I mentioned Linus. He was one of my co-founders back at the first company in 1995, developed the online booking engine. He was working at Hanson Robotics here in Austin. Don't know if you're familiar with the robot Sophia. It was on CNN, and he so Linus was head of research at Hanson Robotics, reported directly to the CEO, and he's been involved in a lot of this stuff for a long time. But so we looked at kind of the opportunity. What's the real big opportunity in AI, and long term, and with generative AI, and of course the artificial general intelligence is kind of the end game. But one of the things that I mentioned we developed back at Travel Storemaker was this middleware that is an aggregator, and has an API out, and it was a very advanced middleware, and we started looking at it. Well, we've got this technology that we inherited from Travel Storemaker, and so now we're thinking of kind of mid to long term is how we can take that application and look at integrate LLMs, kind of like a meta search, if you think about Kayak, for example, and but you're taking a lot of data and aggregating these LLMs and providing an output, and then have our own LLMs, or customers that may want this data from multiple LLMs, but maybe they have their own LLM, and looking at what kind of offerings we can provide companies with a tool like that, and the data where we can be an aggregator of data and integrate their own data into it. And of course, this middleware aggregation of data, but also APIs from sensors or from a robotic standpoint. And I think we've got some technology. We're kind of exploring how this would work in that type of environment, where long term we could look at as our product AI robotics as a path forward for us from a down the road standpoint. And that's our long-term vision. How do we kind of get there from where we're at now, which is a complete startup, and we don't even have a customer yet. We're getting ready to start approaching companies. and go down that path of providing services as a consulting company for AI. So yeah, I think that's yeah, and I think from the consulting services, if you look at companies, right, you have in an organization, an org chart, you've got a CEO and you've got a head of marketing and sales, head of HR, head of ops, uh, chief technology officer, that report to the CEO. And I think what's missing, and where for a lot of you in the future, if you're in AI, where things are going, having a chief AI officer is going to be part of those future jobs that are going to be available out there, because there are companies out there that have a chief AI officer. It's very early stage, but so in a way, that's what we want to provide, kind of a virtual chief AI officer from a consulting standpoint. And because if companies don't get on board with AI now, they could go out of business. It's a threat, and they really need to get on board sooner rather than later. You see a lot of larger companies. If you look at Booking.com, Glenn Fogel, the CEO, I know Glenn, and I saw on LinkedIn, they had a meeting about a month ago, full day meeting with his executives on AI and what they're doing in AI. So the landscape, it seems to me, from what I'm seeing in the research that I've done, larger companies are getting on board with AI. They've got to, and small to mid-sized companies are still kind of not. And there's a open opportunity, I think, how helping those companies get on board. So yeah, so I think with that, open it up to any questions that anyone might have. I'm here today because we're looking for how, if anyone's interested to work with us. Initially, right now, since we're bootstrapped, we're looking for interns, that those roles could evolve into opportunities, full-time opportunities, as we move forward as a company. I named the company Flomad. I've always been kind of into this, flow states, and listening to people that are whole state of flow, and the whole movement with digital nomads and working from home. And I was working remotely for many years, and so that's where the name Flomad evolved from. If you think about kind of an AI, it's spewing data, right? It flows, and so that whole flow, Flomad and digital nomad, and I think it almost sounds like a Flomad, a robot. But I think with bots, I heard, I was listening to a meeting that they had in San Francisco. It was recorded, and it was an 8-hour AI meeting. And during that, one of the guys said, next year is the year 2024 is the year of agents. And so, it's evolving so quickly. And with OpenAI's announcement with their GBTs, and things are just very interesting, to say the least, on how things are moving. And I think all of you are involved in AI, and it's the opportunity of the future. And that's where it's an enormous opportunity, and I think things are just going to kind of evolve from here. And but there's so much data out there, and I think that's what's one of the things that's confusing. It's just so much. And if you're in a company, and an executive in a company, it's just like, what are you supposed to, how are you supposed to figure things out? So as with any startup, you start with one thing and you kind of pivot, and things move, and that's how the nature of startups. So where we're at now may not be where we're going to be in the future, but I think we've kind of have a plan of kind of where we want to get and how we're going to try and get there. Bootstrap it initially, and then see if we want to go out and raise funds. As Jason mentioned, I'm based in Austin at the International Accelerator. The website's internationalaccelerator.com. It's an accelerator for foreign-born entrepreneurs. So they also are looking at kind of AI companies, and so I'm working with them, kind of advising and helping them. So if any of you might be interested in, you're involved in a startup, or you're interested in applying at International Accelerator, their website's internationalaccelerator.com. So with that, Jason, anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I'll open up the floor. And if they don't have any questions, I might ask a few more questions just of you. But let's open up the floor. Raise your hands if anyone has any questions, and then also you can just put them into the Zoom chat if you guys are on the Zoom. Let's start right here.
Which skills are or do you expect to become most marketable within the consulting space going forward?
Did you hear that?
I can speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which skills are or do you expect to become most marketable in the consulting space going forward?
Well, as a lot of the thinking is with prompt engineers. I think being able to know, what to ask these AIs and what information is kind of critical. So, but a lot of companies, I believe, in the future will have some prompt engineer instructors that will be working with their teams to educate them on using prompts. But I think that certainly one of the, there's so many companies. I mean, Mistral, for example, they raised 130 million. I think it was 130. They're now, without 6 months, not even in 6 months of starting up their startup, they're going to raise another 300 million, and they're going to be valued at $1 billion. And they're looking at, writing code. You can already write code, right? Do you need developers in the future? Or as these systems get so advanced, are you going to be able to kind of talk to it and not need a developer, software engineers? So it's there's so much. It's hard to really say what's going to be, the skills of the future that you need. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on what that is?
I'm not sure, but I think that there's a potential great opportunity for developing AI that is more explainable. So where we can understand how reliable it is, and if it's not always reliable, when it is reliable, so that we know whether or not to trust the AI applications we develop.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I was, if you have an AI, a personal AI, and you're sitting there talking about it and talking to it, of course, you're going to think that, hey, that AI, of course it knows. It's giving me factual information, and what it's telling me is true. So if in the future it tells me that the elections in the last elections were rigged, am I going to believe that? And then it starts telling me, well, look, here's Biden, and it's giving me some deep fakes of some things that aren't real, that shows some scam going on and ballots being dropped, and then it nudges me to believe that because it's an AI and it's telling me the truth. And so I think that's a very valid point, being able to make sure that the stuff, I mean, look, does Russia want to get in and provide deep fakes and make sure that Joe Biden is not elected, this next course? And they're going to do whatever they can. So I'm sure it's going to be out there. But yeah, how can you make sure that, those that's not happening is on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Problem.
Huh?
Hard problem.
Oh yeah. And then Amir, you had a question? You can come up here.
Is that a good idea? Is that how?
Yeah, we'll do that going forward, so you don't have
The
to.
microphone is
The
there?
microphone's basically.
Okay.
I think at least.
Hi, John Hazelwood. I'm Amir. So I'm project lead at CSAI. One of the things I wanted to ask is, like, one of the other things I'm involved in is kind of building up an AI research nonprofit, but we've been wanting to build up credibility when it comes to things around consulting. That was one of the things that we were wanting to do, to integrate machine learning into other systems, such as like San Luis Obispo County. Whenever you want to do things like this, it's like it's really hard to negotiate it unless you have a lot of credibility. But if you know that, like, exactly what you need to do it, but the team is new and you just threw it together, and you've been through training and everything, how do you build up the credibility? Because when it's just like a one-to-one kind of thing, like with business to customer, it's easy to build up the credibility. You could just like grab someone off the side of the street and be like, okay, you get this for free, and then rate us. But like for another business or just an organization of people, they expect some type of credibility when you're offering services to them. So how have you actually managed to get through that in Flomad?
Well, again, we're just at the very beginning stages, and we don't have a customer yet. Our plan right now, we've been completing our website, getting a strategy in place, getting a team in place. And so I've been recruiting people that are involved in AI, senior people that have credibility, are in the consulting research space. We're looking right now, some customers, some prospects that we would initially target and provide the service. As you mentioned, non-paid for a certain part of it, and kind of have some history. So, you've got to, I think credibility comes from team, people that are involved, and having some history of being able to do that. So I think you're going to need to have proof of concept with a customer, and then leverage that to go after more customers. It'll get easier, but you got to start with the one, and then you'll get two, and then three, and just like any business.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else have any questions at the time being? Anyone on the Zoom as well? Just about anything about the company, about pursuing opportunities at the accelerator? Okay. Oh.
How do you apply this?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I wanted you to address, John, is if someone's interested in pursuing an opportunity at the accelerator at Flomad, how should they go about applying and getting access to that opportunity?
Well, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Jason, if you want to send out my LinkedIn profile to everybody after this meeting, and then we can connect, and I can get you introduced to the people here. And also, if anyone's interested in, opportunity with Flomad, please, connect with me. And we kind of want to, planning on having kind of a go-to market strategy and launching a newsletter and some podcast. And so we're, interested kind of in, marketing, how we're going to kind of our go-to market approach. So we've got some things that we've got we need to do here that we'd be happy to get help with.
Yeah, and so I'll definitely share, the website information and then also your LinkedIn. And I just want to express that John is a very good connection to have, because he has a lot of experience with the startup industry, and he's pursuing Flomad, which I think is going to be very cool. And John and I actually met in the AI space through a collaborative that we were both members in. And so that's been really cool. And John's very active in the AI space. So he's definitely trying to get all that knowledge. And that's kind of one of the things I'm curious about is how do you go about getting the knowledge that you have and staying up to date on the ventures that are happening in AI?
Oh, it's a lot of research. I'm spending a lot of my time listening to AI podcasts. There was the MIT AI conference, the first one that they had. It's 8 hours a day, and it's all recorded. Sam Altman spoke, and a lot of people spoke, and I watched the whole 8 hours of it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these conferences are online, and there's in San Francisco, there's different meetups that have that they're recording their sessions, and you can watch these online. So it's I've got 30 AI newsletters that I've subscribed to. We want to kind of focus our newsletter and our podcasts on targeting, talking about AI companies that have gotten funding, and kind of a startup investor type of a podcast, a newsletter. I think there's not anyone really kind of doing that. Jason Kalkanik, he does that a little bit on his. It's not exclusive, but to me, being involved in startups, and what's interesting is who's got funded. You've got 10 companies that maybe got funded in the last week, $2 million. AI companies, what are they doing? Why they get funding? Who funded them? Why are their investors funding them? What's their I think it's just you have to immerse yourself. And I was at the startup crawl. It was a startup week last week here in Austin. I went to all the AI panels. I met several people that were, had interesting AI startups, and talking to them, have follow-up meetings with them, with a lot of people, trying to see how we can partner and engage. So it's just spend as much time as you can reading and watching stuff that's online, and going to AI events and meetups where you can meet people and make those connections face to face, because those one-on-one connections are very important, obviously.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned starting your own like podcast at some point. Do you know where that would be? Like, would that be through Flomad or the accelerator or one of the universities?
Well, Flomad, I mean, as far as our marketing, we want to market through Flomad and it won't be any through a university or the accelerator. It'll be a Flomad podcast.
Well, I'll definitely keep my eye out for it when it does start coming out. I'm just gonna scan the floor. Any last questions? Any new questions that have come up in the last little bit? Otherwise, we might get going with the end of meeting kind of announcements. No questions. Awesome. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you mind just hanging on the call a little bit, John, for some questions afterwards?
Sure. I'll hang on.
Awesome.
My
Okay, so I'm
pleasure.
gonna share my screen here. All right, so thank you guys for coming today, and we're just gonna get started with what's coming up this week. On Thursday at 11 o'clock, we are gonna have a information session with Humane. Humane are the company that is currently making a AI pin. So it's basically like a large language model, I guess, that you can just clip onto your clothing, and you can interact with it. It has a laser pointer that can project instructions straight onto your hand, and you can interact with it that way. There's going to be free food. We're going to be able to have a conversation with the engineers that made this pin, like over virtually on the day that they are opening it up to be purchased. So it's basically their launch day, and they're spending some time to talk with us and tell us about their product. So that's super cool, and I hope that you definitely come to that meeting. That's going to be in Bonderson, right over there, our original meeting place. So definitely come check us out there. We're going to have food. It's going to be at 11 o'clock on Thursday. And then Thursday night is actually going to be our first computing club collaborative event. We're going to be having a trivia night from 6:30 to 8:30. And I know you guys have a lot of finals, but there are going to be a lot of fun games and a lot of prizes, and there's going to be free food as well. So honestly, yeah, there's going to be an iPad up for grabs. There's going to be a bunch of iFixit stuff. We're going to have a bunch of merch from the department and just clubs as well. So definitely come check us out there. That's a full computing club collaboration, and we're super excited for it. And lastly, this is this week's feedback form. If you guys can please scan it and just give feedback on this week's meeting, that would be much appreciated. Just everyone go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Can you put those announcements on Discord?
Yeah, there are, you can check the events tab on the Discord, and we will announce them as they come up. We'll also be making Instagram posts. We've already made an Instagram post for the trivia night, but we're gonna make a post for the Humane session as well. Awesome. All right. Otherwise, that's it from us. It was a pleasure having you guys all come here today. And John, if you can just stay on for a question from Amir. Amir, you can come on up and ask your question. Let me just stop recording.